The SciComm Collective acknowledges the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the lands we study, write and record on, and that their sovereignty was never ceded. Hello and welcome to the SciComm Collective.
Different useful knowledge in different areas.
The joy is sharing it.
Making science accessible.
The ignored final step of the scientific method.
Every different perspective.
Science is culture.
The SciComm Collective brings science and science communication to you.
Hi everyone and welcome to today's show. My name's Emma. I'm a Master of Science Communication student and I can't wait to share this episode with you. So today we've got Chrissy Tustison, who is in the final part of her PhD here at UWA. Chrissy is a founder of Seadragon Search, which is a citizen science project hoping to understand more about the biology of sea dragons off the southwest coast of Australia. Chrissy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here talking to you.
Yeah. So tell us about Seadragon Search. What would you like everybody to know?
So Seadragon Search is a citizen science project that is working to understand more about the biology and ecology of the three sea dragon species. That's common or weedy sea dragons, leafy sea dragons, and ruby sea dragons. What the project does is it invites anybody who gets in the water with sea dragons and takes photographs of them to share those photographs by uploading them through an online platform. You just need to have a photograph and you just need to have some idea of when you took the photograph, an exact date or a month and a year, something like that, and know where you took it in terms of the name of a dive site or the general location where the photo came from. Then once we have those photos in our online database, what we do is we as researchers look at the photos and we are able to identify individual sea dragons by their patterning. They have unique patterning. We can use it kind of like a thumbprint to identify an individual. And then we have machine learning tools that help us to scan the photos that we already have in the database, help us to kind of get a short list of possible matches and see if we perhaps already have photos for this new query photo that we're looking at. And in that way, we can assign all the photos of the same individual to one individual ID, and then we can sort of get a picture of that sea dragon's life, no pun intended, but a picture of their life. And from that, we can learn lots of different things. We can learn about sea dragons' reproductive behaviors. We can learn how long they live. We can do analyses to try to figure out how many of them there are in different areas. So lots of things that we can learn from photographs. So that's the goal of the project in a nutshell.
Wow. And your PhD part is nearly finished.
Yes. So for my PhD, I'm looking at population sizes. I'm also looking at some questions about reproduction. So those are things like, when does the breeding season begin and end? It happens differently in different places as well. So making those comparisons, trying to understand more about things like how many broods does a sea dragon have in one breeding season? And then I'm also looking at, because we have a citizen science project, I'm also trying to understand more about motivations and engagement in citizen science and what makes a project sort of a win-win for both the scientists who are implementing it and the people who are contributing data to it.
That sounds amazing. What got you interested in the sea dragons in the first place?
That's a great question. Sea dragons, I guess rewinding a little bit, to those three species, they are just incredible and unique and very distinctive fishes. They're related to seahorses for anybody who has not seen one before. If you picture a seahorse, seahorses tend to sit a little more vertically in the water. So if you kind of tip it on its side a little more horizontally, and make it a little bit bigger and cover it in these beautiful appendages. In the case of leafy sea dragons, it's what it sounds like. They're very leafy looking. They look like they're covered in sort of fronds of seaweed. Weedy sea dragons have smaller appendages, but they're covered in these beautiful speckled spot patterns. And then ruby sea dragons actually don't have the appendages that the other two have. They live in deeper water, but when you look at their coloration, they have this beautiful ruby red color, hence the name. So just all three, and not just their appearances, but their behaviors. Sea dragons are part of the cygnathid family, which in that family, it's the males who brood the eggs. So they have some interesting behaviors, and they're just really, really distinctive, captivating fishes, which makes them great ambassadors for their habitats because people find them so interesting. So for me, I have been interested in citizen science, in science communication, in making science more accessible and understandable and applicable for people. So sea dragons are a great entry point, I think, for a lot of people to be motivated to learn more about these things.
It reminds me of, years ago, the panda that's used for WWF. This iconic animal that then is, people seem drawn to iconic animals. And yes, we've got certain ones in Australia, the land ones, but what are our ocean animals? My daughter has a leafy sea dragon cuddly toy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I love that you can go to the zoo or the aquarium and you can pick up those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And
I have one as well.
Yeah. They're just beautiful, unique.
Yeah.
Unique, but yeah, right?
They're flamboyant.
Yes.
They're gorgeous.
They're beautiful. And so you decided to get the community involved to help you to gather data on them, to be able to understand them more. And then, is that right? And then also it was part of that understanding and looking after the sea dragons means you get to also understand and look after their environment.
Yes. So that's kind of a larger goal, is to raise awareness about the Great Southern Reef, which is a rocky reef system that stretches across the southern coast of Australia from New South Wales in the east, including Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia, and coming all the way over to Western Australia, where we are today. So it's a massive, massive reef system. It's a hotspot for biodiversity. It's just a really important marine place globally, but also for Australia. It is full of species that are only found here, and sea dragons are three of those species. They're only found in Australia, and they're only found in these Great Southern Reef habitats. So that's another thing that makes them very special and very unique, particularly as an Australian icon.
Yeah.
And so by raising awareness about sea dragons and taking an animal that people are sort of intrinsically interested in, we can draw attention to the habitats of the Great Southern Reef and hopefully work towards getting the types of protections in place that those habitats need to survive some of the challenges that are coming in the future and already starting to happen, but probably going to compound with climate change.
Yeah, wow. It's the bigger picture, but also being able to hone in on something to then communicate that bigger picture.
Right.
Which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it seems to be a goal of quite a lot of citizen science projects that I've seen just online. A lot of them, they seem to be go out and count this particular animal or go and give us information about this particular thing. But in the end, it connects to something bigger.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is something that our community is a good fit for with Seadragon Search, because this is a community of people who like to spend time in the water, people scuba diving, people snorkeling, people taking photographs of the things they're seeing out there. They're basically in the field. Some people are out there diving every week, like weather permitting. And so they just have a really good feeling for what's going on because they're photographing it. And then we can't possibly be in all of those places as a small team of scientists, and you need time, you need funding, you need equipment. So it really helps us to, I guess, backtracking a bit, one of the things about the state of Seadragon research in general is that we have smaller localized studies over the past couple of decades, but we don't have a lot of information about sea dragons across their entire range. And that's really important to understand from a conservation planning perspective. So that's what Seadragon Search is trying to achieve, and what citizen scientists enable us to achieve is to scale up data collection to across that range-wide distribution. And so kind of going back to what I was saying is our audience, our community, they tend to have an appreciation for the habitats that they're diving and snorkeling in. They tend to care about that entire habitat. And so they're quite invested in being able to contribute what they can, I think.
Yeah. So, like I don't dive. I'm not allowed to because of my asthma. But once upon a time, I did get to do some snorkeling. And I love this idea of being able to contribute what I see to something that's bigger than me, but also about the things that I really like.
Right. Yeah.
What's the kind of range of participants that you have for your project?
That's a great question. So we launched in October of 2020. So we are coming up on our fourth birthday in a few months here. So since then, our community has grown and become a bit more diverse, which has been great to see. And that's something that we're actively planning and considering about how we can continue diversifying and opening the project up to more and more different people to be able to participate in the future. But we have a massive age range. We have people who are retired and who are using their retirement to just enjoy diving, and they're contributing. Then I think our youngest participant to contribute photos was 11 years old.
Wow.
And we've got some other, and that was a young girl. We've got a couple of young girls, in sort of preteen or teenage years, who are getting out there and learning to dive. And some of them are starting their own little initiatives for things, little fundraisers and things like that in their own areas. And so we've got a massive age range, and then people from all different parts of Southern Australia. So again, going all the way from New South Wales to Tasmania, across here to Western Australia. And we are, I guess the common denominator is people who enjoy spending time in the ocean. And that is something that I think we can probably all agree comes with a level of privilege, where you need to be able to drive to the ocean and get there. And you need, if you want to scuba dive, you need to have the equipment.
Which can be expensive.
It can, there's a cost of entry with scuba diving that is probably prohibitive for a lot of people. And so, and then photographing, camera equipment costs money. So we are trying to think about ways in the future that we can give those kinds of opportunities to people who are interested in learning more about it. But one thing at a time. So that's one of our areas that we're thinking about.
So it sounds like you've really built a big community from this, though, from where it started, and that you said some of the younger ones that are getting involved in doing fundraisers, is that for their marine area, is it? And do you promote that within your kind of citizen science community?
We support, we try to be involved with and support different things that our community members are doing. We don't get involved in anything political because we are a science project. But one of our younger participant, she's located in Victoria. I got a chance to zoom in to a little celebration they were having at a dive shop there, where they were recognizing some of her achievements. And so things like that are really fun, to be able to get to know the participants and understand what makes them so passionate about what they do, and celebrate their achievements, because these are people who are doing really amazing things, getting in the water and capturing this information and sharing it. And, it's not difficult to upload photos to Seadragon Search, but it does take time. So we really want to acknowledge those efforts that people are making.
I love that, because I feel like sometimes I might want to contribute something that I've seen, but then I might send it off into the ether, and then where does it go? Like, what's the point of having done that? Right. It really sounds like what you're trying to build is this two-way kind of acknowledging the people that are contributing, and then, like, what do you kind of plan to do with the science that you find out? How do you plan on communicating that?
Yes, that is, I'm glad you asked about that, because that's a really important part of the project for us, is to feed information back to the community and make sure that they feel involved in what we are doing with their data. I mentioned that part of my research is focused on the citizen science aspect, engagement, and motivation. And to that end, I've been doing interviews with some of our participants who volunteer for them over the past few years to just try to understand more about their experience of the project. That helps us to adapt the project going forward to make it better for everyone involved. And it also helps me with my research, just trying to understand more about citizen science in general and how we can continue to improve it going forward. So from those interviews, one thing that I've learned about our particular community, and I would recommend that anyone in a citizen science project is dialoguing with their community, because every community is unique, so you don't want to just take something that you read in a paper and broadly apply it. You want to really understand the nuances of that within your community. So something that I've learned from talking to our participants is they're really motivated by gaining knowledge, learning more about Seadragons. They have lots of questions. They're an incredibly thoughtful, insightful, inquisitive group of people. Some of them are scientists in their day jobs. Some of them are not. But like I said, they're in the field, in the water, observing things. That's where a lot of research questions come from, is from just getting out there and seeing what's happening and wondering about it. And so that said, it's made it more clear to me than ever how important it is that we are feeding knowledge back to them, because that is motivating. And then that encourages them to ask more questions and go out and get more data, and then we can learn more together. And it's kind of a knowledge feedback loop. So what we've been doing up until this point is my supervisor, Nerida, she's really good at finding interesting insights in the data just from week to week and month to month. For example, there might be an injured animal who's captured in a photograph, and people may be concerned about that animal's chances of survival. And so by having multiple people going out and diving at whatever site that animal lives at and photographing it, we're able to kind of track its journey and then feed back updates to the community and say, this sea dragon that lost its tail still seems to be doing fine. Or, has disappeared but then reappeared a month later. So we try to feed back little things like that. But then some larger updates that are coming have to do with my thesis chapter. Now that I'm getting closer to the end of my PhD, and that'll be, being able to answer some bigger questions, or at least shed a bit more light on some of those questions about, for example, the brooding males. I've heard several people in our community ask, how many broods can they have in one season? There's a lot of debate about that, but it hasn't been quantified with a proper analysis and compared between different places. So that's something, for example, that'll be coming.
That sounds really interesting. It's a question that people are asking, a question that you're asking as a scientist, but also your community are asking, and being able to collaboratively get this and then get your expertise in being able to do the analysis. And then traditionally people might publish the paper and then whatever, but this is your directly also involving those people that asked the question in the first place to go, look, this is the science that you've helped to build, this understanding. That's really cool. Can you give us a sneak peek of any of the stuff that you have found that's interesting or that you're really excited about sharing, apart from this breed part you said about the breeding males?
Yeah. I'm excited as well about the population size estimates because those have a very direct application for conservation. There's a tool called the Red List that comes from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And what that tool does is it provides a framework for assessing a species extinction risk. And so it's very useful in having a red list categorization to be able to say how threatened do we think an animal is. That can help with getting funding, that can help with influencing policy, that can help with just spreading awareness, education. So Seadragons, all the 3 species, we traditionally haven't had the kind of data that the Red List needs to assess them against the categories that they have there. One thing that's really important is understanding how their populations are doing in terms of numbers across their distribution. And like I mentioned, we have had pretty spotty estimates from the past. And we're still working on that now. We still we don't know how many Seadragons there are across their whole distribution. But through Seadragon Search, we've started to get more insights about that. And so working with a team of other Seadragon researchers, we've been working on a updated red list assessment for the common or weedy sea dragon, which was, it's been in different categories over the years, which is kind of a reflection of this uncertainty that we have because of the limited data. Most recently, it was categorized as least concern, which was basically not meaning we're not concerned about it, but a result of not having the data that is needed to assess it, to place it in one of the more threatened categories, to meet the thresholds that they have for those.
So they've put it in this category because that's where the data tells them the data is not enough to tell them about anything else. It's great that it's got a category, but then potentially the category could cause harm if it's under that least concern, and it's great to be able to come back and say, here's some more data and we can understand whether or not it is supposed to be least concern or whether it should be something else.
Right. Like we just want to understand, is that accurate? Is that the best place for it to be, or should it be in a more threatened category? Exactly. So that's something that we've been working on that's going to be coming out hopefully this year, in the year of the dragon.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited about that because that will be a tangible outcome that can hopefully contribute towards other outcomes for sea dragons.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how sometimes we use words like least concern in science, but it doesn't really mean what it might mean for, like, my mum.
Right.
And it's really good to kind of be able to understand that and then go, this is how it's then able to be applied and things like that. Because, I mean, I didn't even know that there was a Great Southern Reef.
Yeah.
Everyone knows about the Great Barrier Reef, but who knows about the Great Southern Reef, right?
Right.
Is it, what was it called? The
Great Southern Reef.
It is, yeah.
And I found that with a lot of people that I've met here in Australia, that when I mention that, people kind of do a double take, like, do you mean the Great Barrier Reef? And I think the Great Barrier Reef has had great PR, like everyone in the world knows about the GBR, which is awesome. There's actually a group that is doing a lot to raise awareness, the Great Southern Reef Foundation. And so if anybody is interested in learning more about that, I would check out their website or social media. They do a lot of cool education around the Great Southern Reef.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So one of our listeners was really interested in how you kind of talk about the brooding male sea dragons. And you mentioned earlier that this is particular to a certain group of species. And I think the idea is, like, we don't see often the males that look after babies. And is that something that people have, like, been interested in when it comes to your research?
Yes, I think that it is something that is people find it to be novel and different, and that makes it interesting. And so I think it's something, the group of signathid fishes, which includes sea dragons and seahorses and pipefishes and their relatives, they are unique in their appearances because they're known for having those long snouts. And then they are unique in their behavior mainly because of the male brooding of the eggs. So yes, I think that is definitely something that captivates people about them.
Yeah, like maybe there's a bit of interest around them because of the fact that it's the male looking after the babies, and it's challenging gender norms potentially, a bit of anthropomorphizing or, putting ourselves into the animals that we are interested in.
Yeah. I think sometimes anthropomorphizing can serve a purpose in the sense of giving us an opportunity to reflect. And I think that animals are really good at that. Animals, different species challenge all kinds of norms that humans have in our culture and society. So I think that as long as we keep in mind that the animals are not humans and they do not think and feel everything and perceive everything in the unique way that we do. But we can look at their behaviors and use those to reflect on our own culture and society. I think that's useful.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. So, what kind of challenges have you kind of had along the way?
Yeah, I think, one of the ongoing challenges is just trying to reach the communities that we want to be in touch with and get the word out about the project and help people to understand how the project works and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. I think that's probably a challenge with any kind of project is to just try to, when you're trying to work with a lot of different people from a lot of different parts of a large country. Yeah, you just want to be able to talk to everybody one-on-one. And the interviews give me a great opportunity to do that with some people. But obviously we don't have the luxury of doing that with every single person that we'd like to talk to. So I guess how we've addressed that is by trying to do a lot of public talks, trying to get in touch with dive clubs or dive shops, trying to just find the people who might be interested in this and let them know that it is a thing and that this is how it works and help them to feel informed about it and comfortable with participating, or not participating, just to try to answer people's questions and help everyone to be informed. I think that's something that we're constantly working on. So it's a challenge, but it is, I think, an inherent challenge in doing something like this. And I think it's a good challenge because it keeps us thinking and evolving and dialoguing with the community.
Yeah. And I guess following on from that, what is something that you think has worked really well for you for this project?
So I'm just going to say the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was our Facebook group.
Oh, yeah?
Actually, we didn't have any formal social media training. We just started social media accounts for this project and then let people know about it and invited people to join. And it's really what the community has done with the Facebook group has been so cool to see because people have really taken to the format that the Facebook group allows to kind of be conversational with one another. And I think the reason that group feels so vibrant is because people are participating in it. And, if somebody goes diving, they're kind of sharing interesting things from their dive that are Seadragon related, or they are maybe asking a question and then other people are answering that question in addition to me and Nerida, answering questions. It's like now people are answering each other's questions about the project and or about observations in different areas. People are able to compare things that are happening in different states and again, generating more questions, more interest in learning. I've even learned that some of our participants have found dive buddies through the Facebook group for Seadragon Search, that when they travel to a different place, they already know somebody there who's going to want to do a sea dragon dive based on meeting people through this group. So it's just really, I didn't know what to expect with it. And it's been so neat to see that develop and to see people's just, again, the cool thing about citizen science is that how else can you bring so much to the table, so many different perspectives, like so many different ideas and insights and questions. And the Facebook group is just kind of a kaleidoscope, I think, of representing all of that. That said, I do have to give a little plug for the project and say that if you post your photos in the Facebook group, that is not the same as uploading them to the database. And I think that's a misconception. Like, people like to upload their photos, and that's awesome to share what you saw on your dive, but we don't take your photos off of Facebook without permission. So by uploading it to the database, you check a box for the user agreement, and you have access to look at the user agreement and to understand that the photographers retain all the rights to their photos, and we take an email address so that we know who owns the photo. And all of that is not part of the Facebook group. That's part of the submission portal. So that's just a quick FYI for people. If you want to share photos, you do need to upload them to the database.
Yeah, it's keeping the part that's ticking all the boxes that you need to contribute to the project formally, I guess. Right.
Because we also have a code of conduct. So we want people to check a box saying that they have looked at the code of conduct. So there's things like that we want to make sure that we're protecting the photographer and protecting the sea dragons as well with the code of conduct.
So is that to make sure that, you're suddenly increasing the number of people going out to photograph sea dragons, it's not going to potentially do any harm, that kind of thing?
Right. We just want to make sure that people are aware of how to dive responsibly with sea dragons. And, some of our participants are very experienced and they can almost teach others about the code of conduct, which is another great thing. And we kind of want to create more of that, more of everybody being educated so that when they are out there in the water and potentially see somebody else getting too close or, seeing the signs of a stressed sea dragon, we want people to know what that looks like so that they can also be stewards of their own dive sites, just because a lot of times I think people don't want to do the wrong thing. They just, people see a sea dragon, they get very excited very quickly and kind of, get very tunnel vision on that and maybe not thinking about what their fins are doing or, if they're landing on the bottom or if they're getting too close to the sea dragon. So the code of conduct is meant to help people become more aware of those things and be able to share that information with other people who, if it was me, I'd be glad for someone to tell me because I think most people want to do the right thing.
Yeah. Before we finish, I wanted to ask how much diving and taking photos you personally get to do.
Oh, yes. So I feel so incredibly lucky because I've gotten to move to Perth to do my PhD and to do this work. And because this is the only place where there are sea dragons in Australia, so I have to be here, which is amazing because I love Australia. And I try to dive every opportunity that I have. So in the summer, that's most weekends. My supervisor, Nerida, and I will go diving. And, it's in the winter a little bit trickier because you get surge and storms and different things that prevent you from getting in the water, but as often as possible. And I've also been lucky enough to travel to other states to do outreach and do talks. And sometimes when we're in those places, we are able to take a day off and go diving, and sometimes with our participants and to meet them in person. And so that's a really cool opportunity as well. So
yeah,
it's one of my favorite parts of being here is getting to get in the water with the animals.
Yeah, do you ever recognize them from the photos?
Yes, definitely. The ones here in Perth at the sites where we frequent here, yes, absolutely.
No names for them or anything?
We do.
You name them?
Yeah. Sometimes we have a sponsorship program. It's another way for people to participate is to sponsor a sea dragon. Say you don't get in the water, but you want to participate in some way. You can sponsor a sea dragon and name it in the database, and we make a certificate certificate and like an enlarged print. So some of them get names that way. But then, you know, the ones that I think a lot of people do this from what I've learned from talking to people, the ones that are the ones you see all the time at your local dive site, you tend to get little names for them in your head. You know, like we don't always just think of them as WA0135. Like it's like, oh, that one, you know, there's one whose fin kind of looks like a fork. So we're like, oh, there's forks, you know, like just kind of think of little things like that.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for coming in and having this chat about your project and all the ways that it connects with people and, you know, how amazing Seadragons are. And so if anybody would like to be involved in Seadragon Search, what should they do?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me and for all of your great questions. So if people want to learn more about Seadragon Search, they can visit our main website, which is just www.seadragonsearch.org. That's sort of our main landing page. And from there, you can find links to the data submission portal, our social media pages. We are on Facebook, as I mentioned. We're also on Instagram and X. And then we also have an email address on there if people want to reach out with questions.
Awesome. Is there one thing that you would like people to take away from listening today?
I think something that has become one of my favorite things about this project is that I think in the same way that sea dragons are an icon for the Great Southern Reef, an example of how incredible and unique species in Australia are. And I think that what Seadragon Search has shown me is how powerful it is for members of a community to, in protecting, gathering information, understanding, just sort of rallying around something that everybody cares about. And I think that there are so many citizen science projects now, and all different kinds, all different levels of participation. I would encourage people to just think about what is something that they really love or care about or that they have fun with, something that brings some enjoyment into their life, and what's a way to maybe get more involved with that thing, with making a contribution and not being afraid that it won't make a difference. Because to me, Seadragon Search has become an example of how much of a difference it makes when everybody gets together and makes a small contribution.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chrissy.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at thescicommcollective.com. That's com with 2 M's. Questions or comments about today's episode? Get in touch on Instagram at the SciComm Collective. The SciComm Collective is supported by UWA's Grand Challenges Impact Grant.